Thank you all for showing up. We'll wait just about another minute or so for other people to join us. All right, it is a minute after. I want to take the moment to thank everyone for coming to be a part of this event and this experience. We are so excited to be able to spotlight some of the amazing women that get to work with our ATSU campus constituents. For those that don't know, my name is Stephanie McGrew, and I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator for ATSU. I am located on the Kirksville campus, but I have the distinct pleasure of getting to work with all of our campuses. So that's why a lot of students will get to see me in various classroom settings or training settings or in various capacities with the university. Today we have three amazing panelists that are part of the discussion today. I will go ahead and what I will do is I'll do an introduction, read the bio of that panelist, and I'll give them the floor to kind of talk for 5 to 10 minutes. They can tell about themselves and what they do and whatever message they would like to deliver to those that are here a part of the discussion. And then after that, we will move into the Q&A portion. If you just submit your questions into the chat box, those will come directly to myself and I will ask them of the panelists. You can ask them to one particular panelist, or you can ask the question to all of them. It really does not matter. So keep that in mind. Definitely feel free to ask any questions that you might see fit, and we will go ahead and get started. So the first panelist I would like to introduce is Dr. Grishondra Branch-Mays. She is a professor and vice dean, academic affairs at ATSU University, Missouri School of Dentistry and Oral Health, also known as ATSU-MOSDOH. And she is the executive in charge at ATSU-MOSDOH Kirksville, Missouri campus. She graduated from the University of Michigan in 1991. Following dental school, she completed a general practice residency program at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics in 1992 and completed her specialty training in periodontology and MS in 1994. Prior to joining ATSU-MOSDOH, she was the Director of Interprofessional Education at the University of Minnesota's School of Dentistry. She has served in several administrative roles, including Chair of the Department of Surgical Sciences at East Carolina University School of Dental Medicine, Director of Predoctoral Education and Periodontics, and appointed Director of Interprofessional Education at the University of Maryland, Baltimore College of Dental Surgery. I would like to now present to you Dr. Branch-Mays.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here and to be on a panel with other very distinguished women. I wanted to start off this conversation by talking about a barrier. As we all know, barriers are defined as something that's physical, natural, ideological, that prevents, blocks, or limits. Not all barriers are problematic. In fact, some serve an important purpose, like a fence that's constructed in a yard to keep a small child or pet from wandering into the street. However, there are barriers designed to limit opportunities, to limit access to resources, to limit financial prosperity, to limit the rights of some, and to limit diversity and inclusion. Those are the barriers that negatively impact leadership opportunities for women, for Black and Brown people, for all marginalized people, by blocking their realization of their goals. Our culture would have us believe that women, especially women of color, are not qualified to lead. I know that many of us have likely been told that some people are natural leaders. I certainly would not consider myself a natural leader. But it goes further to say that others must develop that skill and ability so that they can lead effectively. I believe that all individuals could benefit from development. I believe that the theory of a natural leader in some ways can potentially propagate both conscious and unconscious bias, since typically men have been considered leaders, not women. It's been demonstrated that both men and women have this bias, that in fact, when presented with a scenario in which a title, position of prestige, most immediately begin to think about a man versus a woman. Another relevant, I think, concept as we're talking about breaking barriers and creating pathways for future leaders is that oftentimes in the workplace, when there is a concept of being intellectual or brilliant, that we again oftentimes believe that that's a characteristic that's ascribed to a man versus a woman. Not all of us believe that, but these are typical cultural beliefs. One of the ways that we work at breaking barriers and creating a pathway for future leaders is to change our cultural norms. As a woman of African descent, I represent several of the groups that I mentioned earlier. I'm Black, I'm a woman, and I'm a part of the group that most know are marginalized in our society. And oftentimes, that inequity can be even greater when there's an intersectionality of race and gender. If we look at pay equity, we know that Black females are paid less than both white males and females. So again, this concept, this idea of breaking barriers and creating pathways is to begin by changing our cultural beliefs and what we believe about those who can and can't, or should and shouldn't. I'm very familiar with many of the obstacles of those who belong to the groups that I mentioned, because I am one. Despite these barriers, I think that there's many stories and examples of individuals who are able to break through those barriers or those things that would limit them. And so as I was pondering this panel discussion, I immediately thought of my family, and more specifically, my phenomenal mother. One who was 9, she grew up with 9 siblings. She worked at a very young age, cleaning the homes of wealthy Caucasian individuals and taking care of their children. But she still was able to finish high school. Shortly after that, she was married and started a family. Soon, though, she found herself without a husband, and she had to continue to work while raising a family. One of the things that I think is really crucial as we continue this conversation is that sometimes when there are opportunities, we may not necessarily possess whatever that skill is, but she didn't stop there. When she needed a specific skill, she did what she needed to do. That was to attend classes at night, work 2 jobs, and still raise her 4 children. And as she worked through that process, though she was told on many occasions that she couldn't, she shouldn't, or she should not, it didn't stop her. I just wanted to share that with you because it's a little bit about my story. It's my DNA from my mom. It's her story of resilience, of finding a pathway through limitations. The background that she came from, she would not be assumed to be a natural leader, but in fact, she became a leader in our local school board district, where she became the union representative. And she led that group very well, advocating for better education for children in our district and for better opportunities for the teachers. So I just wanted to share a little bit of my story through my mother's story, because of her, the resilience, the support, and the advocacy made a difference for me. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Branch-Mays. It is so great to hear your story and the words that you wanted to share with us today. So the next person that I would like to introduce to everyone is LaTricia Woods, my apologies. She is an award-winning accredited public relations professional with more than 25 years of industry experience. After 18 years of working in state and local government, LaTricia created Mahogany Communications, LLC, a boutique public relations agency in Arizona. Her past and current client base include educational institutions, government agencies, professional service providers, authors, entertainers, small businesses, nonprofits throughout the country. LaTricia achieved a Bachelor of Arts degree in communication with an emphasis in public relations and a Master's of Arts degree in organizational communication, both from Wichita State University in Wichita, Kansas. She is a member of the Public Relations Society of America, where she serves on the Counselor Academy Executive Committee. She previously served as a president of the Kansas chapter, a board member for the Phoenix chapter, and as a member of the National Diversity and Inclusion Committee. The co-author of A Girlfriend's Guide to Social Media, LaTricia is a frequent presenter on a variety of topics, including multicultural communications, diversity in public relations, personal branding, and best practices in communication strategies. Thank you, LaTricia. We are excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Stephanie. I will have to say that I grew up in a family full of healthcare providers and clearly went a different path. But I grew up in a home filled with nurses and physician assistants, and health was a big part of what I did. I was a candy striper, or a hospital volunteer, as it's probably called now, at the age of 14, and so grew up in a hospital structure. And a family full of very determined, very proud women. It was easy to kind of build your personal strength, build your personal sense of self before going out into the world. Being in public relations, it's a industry that is very led by women leaders, which is great, but we're still breaking barriers even in the PR industry. And in 2021, that's very sad to say. In my professional career, I have been blessed to have a great group of women who I have worked with. My first boss outside of college was a woman. I met her at a meeting of my sorority, and she offered me my first job and led me on the path of becoming a leader, becoming a great public relations practitioner, and also taught me a couple of things about not just breaking barriers, but creating paths for other leaders. I've had the ability to have several women bosses in my time before I went out on my own, and learned that sometimes as women, we are extremely helpful. And we want to pave a path for people, for young women to walk. And then sometimes we want them to walk down the path that we have been through, which is not always the best way to lead. So I've had some women who I have worked for who were like, I jumped through hoops of fire, so I'm going to teach you how to jump through those same hoops of fire, which is great in preparing you on how you can break barriers in your future, but it's not always the most advantageous way to build leaders. I think sometimes when we're paving the way, it's not for us to make people or women who come after us walk that same path, but make the path easier and less fraught with hazards and hoops and things of that nature. So I say that to say, while I've had some great female bosses and all of my female bosses have taught me something along my way, I think as women, we need to determine what type of leaders we're going to be. Are we going to be leaders that lead by the example that you must walk the path that I walked, the way that I walked it, and endure the struggles that I have? Or are we going to be progressive and find new ways to lead and bring those who come along our path along in a more supportive, nurturing manner? And I've been happy to say I had bosses of both examples, and I gravitate to the latter and not the former. When I built my company, Mahogany in 2012, it was something that I was very passionate about because there are not a lot of African-American women-owned PR agencies in the country. And it was important to me to have a vehicle to not just serve the clients that I felt passionate about, whose stories I felt compelled to tell to a broader audience, but also to amplify voices that often get lost in the general conversation in the mainstream media. I think you can come up with several examples of where women's voices have been altered in a manner through mainstream media, and things that may seem important to us are not really what women that I know care about, but it gets lost in what mainstream media decides is important at the time. So what was important for me was to amplify female voices of women of color, and create a way for people who wanted to go into public relations, women who wanted to go into public relations, to find a vehicle, to find an avenue to pursue their dreams that way, and creating paths for them to do such. So I've been blessed to be able to work with other females in PR, cultivating new voices, working with students who are in public relations who are looking to get a start, and helping them on their journey to creating what their path in this industry is going to be. Because we need storytellers that look like all of us, because when our storytellers don't look like us, when the people who communicate our messages don't look like us, they have a hard time explaining authentically what we are trying to convey. And so that's why women's voices need to be amplified. Women of all backgrounds' voices need to be amplified, because those are the conversations that are getting left out of the general mainstream population. And we have to make sure that those are always present. I read a great quote that said, you are confined only to the walls you build yourself. And I think what Dr. Branch-Mays alluded to is there are barriers out there already. So we don't need to continue to create barriers for ourselves. And I think sometimes when we dream and when we set goals for ourselves, we talk ourselves out of what we want because we put self-imposed barriers on what we think we can achieve, on what we think we can have, on what we think we can do. And so if you leave with nothing else today, just know that society is going to do that enough for you. Do not do that to yourself. If there is something you want to do, if there is something that you want to achieve, there are no barriers to doing that other than those you put on yourself. And if you feel that there's a glass ceiling, then walk from under it, build a new building where there's not a ceiling there. Tyler Perry talks about, instead of having a seat at the table, build your own table. And then put that table in a place where you want people that believe in your vision, support your vision around that table. So even in the industries that we're in today, healthcare, communications, or whatever it may be, move yourselves out of the construct and into a place where you can build your dreams without barriers, and while you're doing that, find a way to create a path for others. Thanks.
Thank you so much, LaTricia, for those insightful words. And our last but not least, our final panelist is Dr. Lee Burch, PD or PT, MPH, at EDD. She is currently the Dean and Associate Professor at ATSU University's Arizona School of Health Sciences, also known as ATSU-ASHS. Dr. Burch's past experiences include faculty and administrative positions at the University of Puerto Rico, Central Medical Campus, Long Island University Brooklyn Campus, Mercy College, and the University of New England. Prior to stepping into academia, she served as director of the International Center for the Disabled in New York City, one of the country's first outpatient rehabilitation centers dedicated to interprofessional services, including return to work for persons with spinal cord and brain injury, traumatic injuries. Her scholarly interests are in health education, leadership, and health disparities. Dr. Burch received her EDD from Teachers College, Columbia University in 2005, her MPH from Columbia University, Mailman School of Public Health in 2002, and MSPT from Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons in 1989. She received her BA from the University of Rochester, majoring in psychology in 1981. Please let's welcome Dr. Burch.
Can you all hear me okay? Yes. Well, I'm delighted to celebrate Women's History Month with you here. And I've been inspired by the two speakers that went before me, really listening to what they had to say. So I'm richer for that experience. My name is Lee Burch, and I'm going to start with that I'm 62 years old. So I think I hold the cards in terms of being the oldest one here. And I come from a long line of determined women. I've been surrounded by determined women my whole life. I was interested in Dr. Branch-Mays' story because my grandmother on my mother's side, Maria Petronella Wetterings, she immigrated to the US from the Netherlands and started her family in New York. And because of a language barrier, she began in one of the public schools as a janitor and kept working, and by the time she was finished was the head of the facilities of that district. Always wanted to do more than that in her life, and actually wanted to get into medicine, but she couldn't handle English well. So she is one of our matriarchs in our family, and has been a powerful presence for me throughout her life until she died. My mother, Rosemary, trained as a pediatric nurse at the University of Rochester Strong Memorial Hospital. And she went on to do really interesting work with her nursing degree, and ended up leading organizations, including an adoption agency institution in Boston in her later life. She had a very long struggle with cancer in her later life, and until the end was an inspiration to us all. She ended up writing a book of poetry during that period. My sisters and I grew up learning that we could really do anything we put our mind to. We didn't have any brothers, and we were high energy kids, and my parents encouraged that energy. They encouraged thoughts of ambition, and they encouraged this kind of healthy competition between the three of us. We learned that the ambition, the competition, and the high energy were good things for women. And later on in my life, as I grew older, I found out in those early years that not everyone felt that way. But we also learned that to be strong, we needed to be bold, we needed to speak up, but we needed to be kind, and we needed to let people know if we were not being treated with respect. As a young adult, I came alive during graduate school, and I fell in love with New York City and healthcare. And you've heard my bio to date, but I think my first experience really being challenged with leadership was when I was the director of physical therapy at the International Center for the Disabled. And there I met many women who were really kind of breaking down barriers as women living with spinal cord injury and finding work again. And that was incredibly inspirational for me. I'll just add that I've learned as a woman that there are different kinds of ways of demonstrating strength. Assertiveness is strength. Yes, I believe that is true, but so is kindness, and so is preparedness, and so is enthusiasm, so is empowering others, and so is celebrating others' achievements. And sometimes those qualities in my early years were seen not as strengths. It was assertiveness and almost aggressiveness that was seen as a strength. I think it's important as a woman to find out what you believe in very early on, and then hold on to those beliefs. For me, I believe very strongly in equity to education for all. I believe very strongly in a diverse, rich learning environment. I learn best when I'm surrounded by others with different experiences than my own, with different backgrounds than my own. And I believe in something called diversity self-efficacy, which was coined way back by Combs in the early 2000s. And what it means is that everybody has a different confidence level with working with a diverse group of people. And I believe strongly in that, and learned a lot from my colleagues in Puerto Rico when I was the one that was different than everybody else. And I think that my diversity self-efficacy improved during that time. I've learned that as a woman that there are certain ways that I will not be treated in the workplace, and that I will not be ignored. I've learned that in a large group, whether they're males or females or who's ever there, that if someone talks over you or reframes what you have to say, that you need to speak up and correct them. I've also learned as a woman that if you feel you don't belong, and we used to term this as imposter syndrome, just take a moment with yourself and remind yourself that you opened the door to the opportunity, stepped in, and now you can make a difference. Another piece that I've learned as a woman along the way is that if you feel your kids are the best thing that ever happened to you, you can express that clearly, loudly, happily, and at the same time express that you love your work, that you love your job. I've also come to know the hard way of one more piece I wanted to share with you, that when you're in a room with people, and they can be all different people, different genders, when you know or feel that a joke is not okay, and that joke may be towards another person or maybe towards you, you really can speak up and let someone know that you don't appreciate that humor. Or in the same token, if you use humor in a setting and you've offended someone else, be ready for them to speak up and let you know about it. And I really like that honesty within a group. And the last thing I want to say is that I've experienced as a woman at times that I might have a lot of emotion. My voice might shake, I might get a little teary, I might get excited. And sometimes that emotion coming from a woman is reframed in a way that the room says, hey, that's not okay. And I'm here to tell that I can't see the whole audience, but emotion, even in the work setting, is a very good thing. And so is passion. And these are symbols of how deeply invested people are and should never be seen as a weakness. So thank you so much for inviting me, and that's all I'd like to say right now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burch, for your words of wisdom. So the first question I would like to ask each of our panelists is, as a female leader, what has been the most significant barrier in your career? And you can just pipe in as you would like, or you can go in the order that I introduce you, whichever you prefer.
I'll just take a stab here. I'll speak up. This comes from an experience very early on in my life when I was in New York City at the International Center for the Disabled, but it is kind of followed me in different ways throughout my life. So when I was trying to get the job there as a director of physical therapy, I was fighting for that job with several people who ended up being male. And at one point, I was dissuaded from going forward with my desire to get the job by actually at that time the director of human resources. And this piece that I've talked about before, that piece, that fun-loving piece, and really having high emotions and wanting to display my passion, was seen by the head of HR as a weakness. And he let me know about that. And that to me was a barrier, because it was the HR office letting me know that something that was part of my personality was a barrier. And end of story of that was that I ended up actually, I'm just going to say it honestly, ended up, writing that guy up. But it was an experience for me that I had to be strong, that in self-reflection, and think, this is not a barrier, this is who I am. I think he's interpreting this because I'm a woman. Am I going to fight this or am I not? Uh-oh, I could get fired, and all of that. So in smaller ways, that kind of barrier has followed me in my life. So I'll stop there.
Okay, I will chime in after that. Mine's a little bit different because again, PR is a very female-driven industry. But a barrier that I had to overcome, that I think a lot of women have to overcome, is knowing your worth when it comes to negotiating salaries. And I know my first job as a public information officer, I was so excited when I went through the process and they offered me the position. And I took the first offer that they gave me and I thought it was amazing. And I was on cloud 9. And after they hired me, probably about 6 to 8 months later, we were having a discussion and they were like, you know, we really need to tell you that we would have paid you up to $10,000 more, up to $10,000 more than what we offered you, but you didn't ask. And just, I think sometimes it can go back to the imposter syndrome that Dr. Branch spoke about. We are so happy to be in the room and invited to the dance that we accept the offers that were given without taking the time to see what we can achieve, what we can get, and asking for what we know what we're worth. And I think as a business owner, it's different now because I know that once I set a price for a client, I can't go up if I've undercut myself. So I think as women, we really have to do a better job of knowing what we want. And when we go into our negotiations, asking for what we want and not being afraid to stand firm. And this is my value. I know what my value is. And if you want me on your team, if you want me working for you, this is that number. These are my terms, and sticking with that.
I appreciate both of your answers, and I'll go back to probably allude to something that both of you stated. In dentistry, there are very few women who chair a department or are deans. That has changed tremendously. But specifically, there are very few who look like me. And my first position as a chair, all of the faculty members in my department were all men, and they were all Caucasian men. And the barrier for me is in that circumstances, first of all, I happen to be an introvert. You guys might not know this from this presentation, but I'm an introvert. And so being able to stand up at times and not be too aggressive, not being seen as too aggressive, but strong enough to lead. So that is what I would say was one of the biggest barriers of getting beyond that. And getting beyond that really goes back to valuing who I am myself, first of all, and understanding that we all come from different backgrounds. We have different perspectives of how we view people. And the best way to break that barrier is really to develop a relationship with those individuals so they get to see who you are. Or in some cases, we know people choose not to do that. But in most cases, in the work environment, most people are collegial and they want that. So I'd have to say that has been a difficulty. And I would say it's a difficulty for a lot of women, that we can't seem too aggressive, because that's not okay. But it is okay, because at times that is what one needs to do to move forward, whatever the mission or goal happens to be in your organization.
Thank you all for that insight. And this next question is also directed to all of you. What advice would you give a young woman trying to ascend into an administrative position such as yours?
I'll start with something from my own experience. So I think it's really important when you're looking towards a goal, whatever that goal is for you, to use some imaging. And whatever that is for you, for me, I'll remember some scary times when I wanted to try to apply to something or tried to go for a position. And I knew that I had to have a vision in my head that worked for me. And believe it or not, for me, I'm not a soccer player at all, but my kids have played soccer their whole life, and I've always wanted to be. So for me, that was a vision of me actually being a soccer player and getting that ball right in the top hand corner. And that might sound trite, but I think whatever your vision is, to have that, because as you go for something, as you try something, as you move out of your comfort zone, be ready to be frightened, to be ready to be scared, and be ready to be, as a woman, and I'm not always, but when I really want something, I am over prepared, because you will be tested probably at a different level. So that's one piece of it. And second, and this is again going to sound corny coming from a 62-year-old woman, but I'm going to say it, have a theme song, have a song that just inspires you to no end. And that song goes on in your head when you're getting ready to make that move. For me, and you won't know this song because all of you are way younger than me, but for me, it's Let the River Run, which is a theme song of this Carly Simon in New York City, and this woman who actually wanted to bust out of the secretarial forces and get a really good job at an agency. And so there was that song. And for me, whenever I want something badly, that song comes on for me over and over. So that's where I'll stop.
For me, I would say the concept of intentionality. I think, first of all, to start off with clarity about what is important to you, and then to invest your time, focus, and energy on those things. It does require, as was mentioned sometimes, you being better and working harder to achieve that. But if you're clear and it's truly what matters to you, then you will take that time to do what's needed to prepare yourself. And I heard over prepare yourself in some instances, so that you're ready for the challenges that are ahead, because there will be challenges. And again, I have to go back and again and again and say, just believing that you're capable of doing it. That's the first thing, getting in front of your own the barriers that you create for yourself, which I think that LaTricia may have mentioned.
And I'm going to take what both of these wonderful ladies have said and add on to that with find an ally, not necessarily a mentor, but an ally. And find someone who is in the position that you want to be in, and reach out to them, find out how they got there, what steps they had to take, learn the pitfalls, the good, the bad, the ugly. I teach public relations classes at a community college, and I just had a student reach out to me and say, can I talk to you about what you do, how you got there, what your journey was? And that way you have a good sense going in what is going to be in front of you. But you're taking the vision that Dr. Branch spoke of and the intentionality that Dr. Branch-Mays spoke of and the vision that Dr. Burch spoke of, and then you're putting that in front of you with a person who's walked that walk and can tell you how to get there. And what Dr. Burch mentioned is something that I actually tell some of my clients, not just have that power song, but have a power playlist. And anytime that you are interviewing or you're preparing for something huge and you just need to get yourself up to a certain level, you have this playlist that you can tap into. And not just a playlist, but you know, what vision excites you, you want to focus on that, what's going to drive you to be your best self, because that's what you want to bring forward in those situations. But if you can find an ally who can help you on your journey, that's going to help you long-term and pay dividends over dividends, because you have someone who can be with you hand in hand during your journey.
Great responses from the three of you. The next question, often in these settings are akin to preaching to the choir. Though it is wonderful to have the support of like-minded folks, especially women, how do we bring men into these discussions?
We have Clinton. We start with the men at the table and each one reach one. But I think it's being comfortable to have very open and honest dialogue on situations that you're encountering, because only when you're able to really talk about your truth and talk about situations that are impacting you, that things get better. I think sometimes as women, we all know we hold things in and we just keep taking it in, and we pack it down and we pack it down, and we just keep rising above. But at some point, what you've packed down has gotten so far up that it's impacting you from moving forward. So we have to become better at not packing it down and pushing it back to another moment, and addressing things that happen in the moment. I know when I'm having discussions with my husband is very in the moment. I'm gonna deal with it at a different time. And we have to get better at addressing things as they happen, like those situations that Dr. Burch referred to, when people talk over you, when people belittle or reframe your comments, or when they say, oh, your voice is getting a little high pitched, don't get angry. Those are things that we have to address in that moment, so people can get a sense of what they're doing at that time to evoke such a response. But having those authentic conversations in a setting where you feel comfortable, where you feel that you can articulate what you're going through and it's going to be received, that's a great first step to making change happen and bringing men into the conversation.
I think that there are a lot of men who are a part of the change that needs to occur, and this is something that's true and passionate, and a passion for them. I think that what we just heard is absolutely true. It's having those conversations. If we don't have the conversation, then there's not the possibility to realize that truly we are on the same page. Or if we're not on the same page, what types of things do we need to do to make that occur? Does it mean that for that lone gentleman who does understand some of the challenges, they may also have other friends who understand in the workplace that you are not aware of. So I would say also the network concept of finding those individuals who are like-minded, and then having them influence the individuals that are closest and nearest to them. So we don't have to do it alone, but we need to bring everybody on board to help and move us to that change that we're looking for.
I very much agree with what's been said before me. I think one of the examples that comes up for me again and again, and how do we bring people, how do we stop preaching to the choir and bring more men into this conversation? What happens sometimes in a group setting as a woman, you might have a fantastic idea and you put it forth in a group setting. It's skipped over. And later on, a male might come up in the room with that same idea that was yours. And the men in the room, for some reason, will now recognize the idea. You've probably all been in that kind of experience already. It's really important at that point to say, yes, that is a great idea. That was my idea originally. So let me talk a little bit about it. So to kind of steer those conversations back to what your truth is, you came up with the idea. You need to be acknowledged for the idea. And then I think that there are men that have a hard time with women rising into leadership positions. It's just who they are. So if you can possibly get in conversations with men that where you are respected as offering them constructive criticism and you receive their constructive criticism and slowly try to develop a respect between the two of you. That has happened to me personally here, where the respect might have not been there originally, but with some dialogue back and forth and that constructive criticism, and both of you listening to that, both of you venting a little bit, you can kind of start to bring in who we were referring to as kind of the non-believers in women rising. So, yeah.
Great answers. And we do have a male who just chimed in and said that he is proud of what he can do to empower women, would like to know what he can do better or what he can do to improve and what the issues are that he might not recognize.
I'll take a stab at that one. I think it goes back to what Dr. Burch said, that if you're in a room and you see that a woman's idea has been hijacked by someone else, speaking to that or serving as an ally to champion women on the team, to make sure that their voices are being heard. I think sometimes you can be in a setting and you know that someone's getting spoken over or somebody's not getting a chance to voice their opinion. Make a way for that to happen. Or just, offer to be a listening ear, a sounding board when you see a colleague may need that kind of support. I think if you present yourself as an ally, as a person that's there to be helpful and to support and to lend a hand when needed, they will find ways to use you in that area, or build a partnership with you that can be beneficial to both of you. So I think just letting that be known that you're wanting to do that you're passionate about doing that will be a great first step.
Do either of the other panelists want to chime in on that?
I could tell a quick little story, and that is that when I was a chair, I was the only female chair, and in order for the other chairs to get out of the building and get to lunch, because we were all in one line, they had to walk past my office. So every day they would walk past my office and they would head out to lunch, and they would of course never invite me. And finally, I decided that maybe I might approach them and say something about this. And so I said, oh, so I see you guys are headed out to lunch again today. Where are you headed to? And, you know, they said they were going for Mexican food. And I said, oh, wonderful. I love Mexican food. I was hoping to be invited. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But the reason why I brought that story up for what can I do is to be inclusive, to take that step when nobody else is, to include other individuals, ask things that normally you might ask, you know, a man to be a part of the conversation. Bring in others, include them. I think that what I really, really believe is that while, yes, we all have differences, I think that there are so many things that we agree upon and we believe in. And it's not until we're able to come to the table together that that occurs. So including individuals that you normally wouldn't include. I did go to lunch with them though, because I invited them.
Great. And so another question is, as a woman leader, what role does emotional intelligence and emotional awareness have in your leadership style?
That's one I struggle with, because I often think that as women, there's too much emphasis on emotional intelligence and emotional awareness. And I think that can be a positive and a negative. I think women by nature are very inclusive beings, are very intuitive beings, but at some point, it can be used as something that's held against us instead of uplifting us. What I think our society needs, especially at a time like this, we're in a pandemic, we have a different work construct now with people working from home and doing Zooms and all this. There's now a call for how do we be more inclusive as leaders, more connected, more sensitive to what our teams are going through. But, you know, when I think women are often seen as too emotional, too easily angered, too easily excitable, which are constructs that are not the case. I think everybody has the opportunity at some point to be too emotional or too high strung or too easily to be angered by what they're passionate about. But that's something that's not just confined to women. It's humans, because we're passionate about things we're passionate about, and we're going to speak out about them. But as leaders, I think the most important thing is just to be intuitive to your teams and to be, especially at this time, be sensitive to what they may be going through, not just because it's a pandemic, in the midst of racial and social injustice, in the midst of a changing economy. There's so many things that are going on in society that we need to be wary of. That's what leaders need to be sensitive about as how they are impacting their teams, not just professionally, but personally. And I think that's just, any leader needs to be in tune to that, male or female.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the kind of the comment that women are almost expected to be emotionally intuitive, to be the best listeners, to care the most, to be the kindest. And yes, you know, often that then boomerangs back to us in terms of kind of a dichotomy. You're either kind or effective. you either take care of people or get ahead. And there's never this kind of, well, historically recognition that those qualities on both sides can happen within a male or a female. So the guy in the audience who said, what can I do better? One of the pieces that could come from men is just this comfort level with showing how much you do care, because I think there are male leaders in our institution and outside of our institution that care deeply, and maybe they don't feel they have permission to show that as much as women do. And then on the other side, women always feel like they have to think of themselves as the best listeners, when in fact we all of us are not all of the time. You know, we also get irritated or whatever the you know, the emotion is. So yeah, so that dichotomy, I don't like it. You know, I think that that those qualities can be found in any individual.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. I am going to take a moment. There was a participant who wanted to make a comment, but give me just a moment because I am going to unmute them to allow them to say something. Let's see if I can. Let's see. I think it's working.
Yeah, that's a person who wanted to know how they could do better. That male that wanted to know how he could do better was me. It was actually framed a little bit. I was trying to answer the question, what can we do to get men involved in the discussion? And this is exactly what needs to happen. You know, in my career at ASDOH, I've worked with marvelous women, and I find myself constantly surrounded by women that I have the privilege to work with, and I'm smart and I listen to them. Some of them are on the call today, but I think that also I'm more sensitized. I hope I'm more sensitized to this issue because I have 3 daughters that I want to grow up to be strong women, and so I'm proud of what I do, but already, but it's always good to have these conversations because I don't know what I don't know. It's good for me to reinforce the issues that really matter to you, because I may not know. I may not know exactly what they are. Might think I know, but you know, how to get men involved in this conversation is having conversations that men are involved with, so we can listen and be reminded of the issues that are of highest concern to you.
Thank you so much for offering that insight. I know it's very valuable to know that men are wanting to jump in and be a part of that change and that shift. So here's another question for the panelists. You spoke of finding allies. Let's be real. Women are often those who perpetuate the barriers of change. How do you think we can work to bridge these barriers?
Good question. Very good question. So in bridging barriers, first you have to address it, get rid of it, and build another one. So in my intro, I spoke of the 2 different bosses I had, and I had a boss that was great, but she's like, you're gonna jump through every hoop of fire that I've gone through, and that's not great. That's not helpful. We want to build bridges, not barriers, and we want to do that by, you know, we all have those friends that are naysayers that are like, you can't do that, it hasn't been done, I don't know why you're even going to try. You've got to remove that. You've got to remove those voices from you. You've got to remove that energy from you, and you've got to forge your path on your own. And sometimes to be a leader is to be by yourself, because we all know as people on this panel and those listening, you have been the first at something in your school career, your professional career, or something. There has been something where you have either been the first woman or the first woman of color or the first man or man of color. There's something you've been the first at. And so being a leader, especially during times like these, sometimes mean you're doing it on your own and you're doing it by yourself. But it doesn't mean that you have to stay the only one and that you have to stay being alone, because you're going to build a way for other people to join you in the process. And I think being creative, being collaborative will help us break through barriers and build ways for other people to help us build bridges and make more opportunities for people to join us so we're not the only ones.
Did either of the other panelists want to
The
comment
end.
on that?
It's like our vice president says, she may be the first one, but she will not be the only one.
Right, that's right.
That's true. Well,
So
perfect.
how do we make sure we are not the only ones? That's what we're working on.
Perfect. So the next question is, for me, what's been more surprising and saddening is entering the workforce as a woman has been the encounters in which I'm going to come back to this question because I need to read it. It's written a little different than I'm used to. Here's another question. Have you drawn professional inspiration from other women? And if so, who was it?
I think for all of us, we've drawn inspiration from the women in our family first, and then the women in our industries, because from listening to our intros, we all were really blessed to grow up with very strong, determined women who knew how to get things done. And, you know, I was raised by my grandmother, and, you know, just that inspiration of her raising her family and then raising her grandchildren, and then, you know, and still being in the community, in the church, and working in the hospital. We all have those inspirations that are driven from our family experience first, and then we look out into women in the community who have blazed trails that we are just in awe of, and then women in our industry. So I think for me, it's kind of hard to limit it to one or two people, but I think for everyone, you have to have kind of a collection of women that you kind of just look to as a spear and say, wow, these women inspire me. These women just make me proud. And I want to do what I can to be like them, to emulate them, and to make the women that are looking at me proud.
Yeah, and I'd love to add to that. I think for me, I'm inspired, of course, by famous women that I read about. But in terms of my circle, I have a tight group of sisters, my real sisters, and friends. And they are the ones who I go to. They do not work here. They are not in the health professions. I go to them and I get re-energized, replenished with their stories and both their failures and their successes. In addition, and this is important for me, I'm inspired by people younger than me. So I've been inspired by students here. This is true in terms of how they handled some of the things, the barriers that they found in COVID, for instance. I'm also inspired by my daughter, who had a real struggle in growing up in Arizona, and came out as a lesbian in the Gilbert Public School District, which was very hard for her, and then went on to just find her dream at NYU in arts administration, etc. And I'm inspired by her every day in terms of barriers that she faces in a world that I don't know. So I think that you can find that inspiration with other women. You read about them, of course, everyone who's been on this type of a panel, Women's History Month. But then I think it's really important that close circle of women that inspire you with those real stories, those honest stories that they share with you every day. I think that's important for women.
As you heard from me, my biggest inspiration is my mother, but also the other women in my family as well. Outside of those individuals, there are, it was Dr. Burch just mentioned, there are students who go through all kinds of adversity and still are able to excel. That inspires me. Also, my second grade teacher was a big inspiration for me. The words that she spoke that encouraged me, she was amazing, and her sister also was a third grade teacher. And so those two sisters made a big difference in my life. Seeing them in their positions and the way that they truly cared about their students, that was truly inspiring to me. So.
I think LaTricia had an activity she wanted to do with everyone.
Well, it is Women's History Month, so this is the interactive portion of the program, and it just popped into my head, so bear with me. As it is Women's History Month, and I mentioned earlier that all of us has something that we are the first of, I would like everybody to put in the chat one way that you have made history. What is something that you are the first of? So I am going to, and make sure that you send it to everyone, and not Stephanie. I was the first Black female public information officer for the city of Wichita. And everybody put their first in the chat so we can celebrate all of the history makers that are with us today. And while you're doing that, Stephanie will ask her next question.
Definitely do that. The next question is, what's one of the toughest decisions you've had to make in regards to your career, and how did it impact your life?
I'll start
I
with that.
will go.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
No, go right ahead.
Rock, paper, scissors. I left working for the government to start working for myself. Working for the government is one of those sacred things that, they say once you have a government job, you stay with it until you retire. And I had been a public information officer for 12 years in 3 different cities, and just was not feeling the passion for it anymore, and wanted to do something different, and wanted to do something that energized me every day, and that was not it. And I had started my business in 2012. It's just something that I love to do on the side, and decided in 2013, I was just going to take a leap and work for myself. And I had 2 clients at the time and didn't know how long it was going to take to get back to the salary that I was making, or how I was going to expand. But I had a plan and a dream, and I made the leap. And that was 9 years ago this August. So yeah. And I'm happy to say because of that, I get to work with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion for ATSU.
How about you, Dr. Burch?
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the hardest decisions was when I was director of physical therapy at the University of Puerto Rico and Centro Médico. And I was really loving it. But we had 3 small kids and my husband couldn't find work. And I struggled with this for a long time. I finally had to leave that position. And I did not want to. I absolutely did not want to. But it wasn't working out. And so I think that for me, it was this lesson of I always got to do whatever I wanted to do, you know, and my whole family followed me. And this was one of the first times where I recognized that it wasn't working for everybody. And so that was the hardest, that letting go of something where I had just started to make some momentum and I was feeling really good about being in an interesting place and a new place. And I'm an explorer at heart, and kind of giving it all up and then starting again. That was the hardest.
The hardest decision for me occurred when I moved to Kirksville, Missouri, and left my husband in Minneapolis, Minnesota. After being married for many, many years, we started our careers together, practicing together. Every university that we worked for, we worked together. We had our own practice, we practiced together. So it was a big leap of faith for me to move to Kirksville, Missouri without my spouse. Both of us had great career opportunities, and we didn't want to hold each other back from doing what we wanted to be doing. I don't think that we understood at the time that it was even more difficult than we had assumed it would be to live apart. We like each other quite a bit, so and we spent lots and lots of time together, so that part's been pretty difficult. But what's made it easier at times is to work with the wonderful people that I work with at MOSDOH and ATSU.
Yes, thank you all for sharing that. We will ask one more question because the time is coming up and I know that I would like not to go over time. So the next question is, what advice would you give the younger generation of women seeking to pave a new path in your profession?
I'll start, and I won't speak to physical therapy or public health because I've moved away from that into higher ed. But I think one of the most important things to do if you want to move into higher ed administration is to find some really great courses in leadership that are focused on women. And to go and do like a week-long course. And I can give you some great advice and some actual courses that have been pretty life-changing for me in terms of that experience, because it's there where you can really listen to women, in some cases from all over the world, but definitely from all over the country, and their own kind of trials and tribulations, but also just this feeling of camaraderie of the fact that you can do it. And so that's what the advice that I would give. And if you email me or text me or whatever, I'd be very happy to give you some ideas of those courses.
Stephanie, can you repeat the question? I was chatting to everybody's histories. They were great.
The question
Dr. Burch has ran a marathon in 3 minutes and 30.
No, 3 hours.
3 hours and 30 minutes. And it took me like 4 hours to walk a half. So,
well, no, this was in my 30s. So,
yes, the question is, what advice would you give the younger generation of women seeking to pave a new path in your profession?
I was too chatting as well, typing in my chat. So I did miss the question. Thank you for repeating the question. I'll go, or either you can go first.
No, I defer to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate it. I would say that first of all, I would make sure that it indeed was what I wanted to do, because there are going to be difficult days ahead. So I would say that's the first piece, is being sure that it is indeed what you want to do. And once having decided that, then I think it's really important to find individuals who are in that particular, if it's a specific specialty area or whatever it may be, to find an individual, whether it be male or female, someone who you believe can be an advocate for you, but also that you advocate for yourself. Of course, that's extremely important. The other piece is that I would make sure that I was intentional about having all of the specific credentials that I needed, so that there's no question, even though there shouldn't be a question, but oftentimes there is, that you have the credentials that you need to succeed in that particular field. I think that you definitely, it was mentioned before, and I think it is important that you find allies, individuals who are willing to mentor and coach you, but also just those individuals who maybe aren't there to mentor or coach, but who are there to listen to you. And the final piece that I would say as it relates is that value yourself. Value who you are and what you bring to the table. It does require that you sell yourself. And you're not able to do that unless you truly value yourself. So that's the first piece, is valuing who you are. And again, if there is someone who would be interested, I would love to talk more with you. If there's something that I can do or something that I've gained that could be helpful, I'm happy to share it. So thank you.
Okay, they answered the question so well. I really don't have much to add, but I would say find something that you're passionate about. It's very easy to have a job. You want a career. You want something that's going to excite you when you get up almost every morning. It won't be every morning, but almost every morning. And something where you feel like you are making an impact, where you want to make an impact. So start there. And then, like they said, do your research, especially with the younger generation. They're making decisions based off TV shows and YouTube shows and movies. And, you know, when Scandal was on, I would get that question a lot. You probably get Grey's Anatomy or whatever. You don't know where they're pulling their information from. So do your research, find someone in that profession that you can connect with, that you can ask questions of, to make sure it's what you really want to do. And then just build your plan and work your plan. And again, value yourself and build allies. And just to kind of bring in the chat, as you can see, you're all trailblazers in some way or other. So when you value yourself, remember to celebrate yourself. One thing I don't think we do a great job of is celebrating our own successes. And as we're ending Women's History Month, take some time today to just celebrate what you've accomplished. And as you see in our chat, we've all accomplished something that we can be proud of, that we can celebrate, that we were first, that we've made history ourselves. So just remember that, and let's help the next generation of trailblazers and history makers.
Perfect. Thank you so much to each of our panelists for deciding to take time out of their busy schedules. As you see, they're trailblazers and they have a lot of things going on in their lives. So we appreciate them taking the time to speak with us and give us insight today. Clarissa, is there anything else that I'm leaving out that you can think of?
No, I believe that's it. We just ask that you please fill out that Qualtrics survey when you have a moment. It helps us know if we need to do anything to better the services that we provide and the discussions that we provide. So thank you so much to everyone.
Yes, and definitely stay tuned for the other forums and other panels and other educational experiences that are going to be offered through our office. So definitely pay attention to those emails that you get from communication and marketing, but more importantly from our office. And as always, reach out to our office if you have any questions, and that email is diversity@atsu.edu. Or if you need the contact information of any of our panelists, we can definitely provide that to you as well. So thank you all for your time, and definitely let us know if you have any additional questions, and we hope that you have a great day.
Happy Women's History Month, everyone.
Thank you, LaTricia. Thank you, Dr. Burch, and thank you, Dr. Branch-Mays.